Despite entering the season as one of the Super Bowl favorites, Lamar Jackson and the Baltimore Ravens fall to 1-3. Katie Caldwell, Jeff Lloyd back here with you today. Jeff, let's start with Lamar. So he left the game with a hamstring injury. He does not seem very happy right now. And honestly, with that record, I wouldn't be either.
No, and it's fair, but you're the quarterback of the franchise. So, and nobody wears that record more than the guy under center.
Yep.
And yes, look, you're missing, Kyle Van Noy. Yes, your defensive line does not look like it has in years past. The interior of your offensive line, your guards, not necessarily the best, play, getting. And everybody's like, oh, well, Costa always does a really good job, but you're not going to fix every hole every year, especially during the season. It just doesn't necessarily work that way.
Unless you're Howie
And
Roseman. Other than that,
that,
no.
well, it goes a little north of Baltimore, maybe in Philly is where it lies exactly. But also, there are some things here that, for me just look kind of concerning. They made this move for Derrick Henry 2 years ago, which again, I never understood it because nobody ever talked about the Baltimore Ravens running game being an issue. But Derrick Henry makes a decent amount of money. So guess what? With Derrick Henry making double figures, yeah, maybe that's a pass rusher you could have. Maybe that is a better interior offensive lineman you could have on this roster. And for Derrick Henry right now, he's not giving you certainly at all what he was giving you last year, which is a big, big difference.
Hmm.
And even, the Cleveland Browns 2 weeks ago just basically said, we're just going to keep jetting in the back. We're going to take Henry away. And
Yep.
they did, because if you can penetrate, there's not much Derrick Henry can do, because Derrick Henry at this stage of his career cannot run laterally. He's not going to run busted outside and get yards that way. It's got to be straight north and south. If there's a hole there and he gets going, yeah, he's basically a freight train to try and bring down. But it takes a little time to get all of that going with a man so big. Also, part of it, with the passing game, it's really become Zay Flowers dependent.
Mm.
And, that's great when you're running for 200 plus yards a game.
Yep.
And then all of a sudden, hey, now we slip into play action and everybody on the defensive side of the ball is stunned and you have a guy wide open. Isaiah likely getting back into health, hopefully can be something that kind of helps his passing game, because he was a huge part of their success in the air last year.
Yeah, he
Has
was.
missed most of the early part of the season. Mark Andrews is still good to help, but not necessarily going to give you the dominant performances we were getting out of Mark Andrews for that 5, 6 year run.
Yeah.
There's some holes on Baltimore. And look, even the best GM can't fill every hole every year. And eventually, you're going to have to survive with a little less than everything being good. The Chiefs, left tackle issues, not always necessarily working out for even though
Mhm.
you're good, you're going to have a hole. You have to find a way to overcome it. And if Lamar left that game yesterday late in the third quarter, but still somehow is okay to go this week, it's a really bad look in my opinion. It's you're supposed to kind of go down with the ship. You're the guy, and they have well, they got the Texans, then they got the Rams. You're you just got to find a way to like get it right. And it always seems when the Ravens are going good, it's always style wins. Everything
Mm.
is double figures, and it's easy. And, they could probably use a little more, cuts, cutting, scraping, clawing, to find a way to victory. And, might take all, 48 guys that dress on Sunday to do it. Certainly injuries, a bunch of guys left the field yesterday
Yeah.
for Baltimore. So that's a lot. Another thing that's going to be highly considered about where they're going to be going into this game next week. And look, the Texans are 1-3, and I think the Texans are going to go into this game going, we can't be out 1-4.
Yeah.
So we got to find some way to gut out a victory here over the Baltimore Ravens. Um, y- I don't know where it's ultimately going to go. And I think for the Ravens, they're in a pretty good situation that they don't have to get extremely hot to find a way to win the AFC North. Because
Right.
basically, I think you're only competing with Pittsburgh. You still have both games with Pittsburgh, but Pittsburgh traditionally always plays the Ravens tougher than other teams.
Mhm.
So it's not as bad as it could be for Baltimore. Say if Joe Burrow was healthy and maybe
Yeah.
that, the Bengals were going into tonight's game at 3-0. But, it's certainly not the prettiest picture. And, there was questions. When McDonald went to Seattle to take the job as head coach, a lot of people were kind of surprised it was Zach Orr who got the jump to DC, and now it's not necessarily working out so well.
Mhm.
And that was John Harbaugh's call. And I'm not saying anything's going to happen to John Harbaugh with his history there, but it just goes to show that you can be as successful as you want in this league, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't necessarily mean every move you make is going to work out or it's going to it's going to hit. Rokon Smith doesn't necessarily look like the same player he was a few years ago. Looks like
And
he's
he ended
actually
up leaving the game last night.
yeah, well, Roquan Smith looks like he's carrying around a little extra weight, and
Mm,
that's first thing I noticed watching, bell to bell against the Cleveland Browns. He had a good game that day, but every time you saw him, it was like, well, phew, he
mm,
definitely had a little bit of a bun in the oven type of look there. Which who knows, maybe he had some sort of little slower recovery in the off season where maybe he's working his way back in, but he certainly didn't look like the Roquan Smith who'd been terrorizing the league for the middle for a while.
mhm.
You had Wiggins go down yesterday, your former first round pick, second year
Marlon
cornerback. He
Humphrey.
went down. Yep, Marlon Humphrey. And that's always the thing. And I've talked about this with numerous guys over the years is once one guy kind of taps out and is out for the game, all of a sudden it seems a lot easier for, everybody else to be the next guy to say, you know what? Yeah, maybe I am done. Maybe I am done. And it's not necessarily the best thing in the world. And maybe, in a game that was tighter, hey, I'm going to cut my way through this. I think we can get
Mm,
this victory. So maybe then it's only, an injury for a week or two, maybe where as opposed to 2 or 3 weeks. But, I mean, all signs yesterday for Baltimore. I mean, we prefaced it when we talked about it. One of those teams was going to be 1-3.
mhm.
And Baltimore walks out of it. It's not like it was 1-3. You lost at the last second of the Kansas City Chiefs. This game was essentially over by halftime.
Quick pause. If you haven't subscribed to the BetCanada YouTube channel, you can do so below. It's free and it helps support our channel so we can keep bringing you NFL and NHL content. Now, back to the show. Yep, it definitely felt like it. When you talk about John Harbaugh, I feel like I started to hear a lot of fire Harbaugh noise on Twitter after this one. How big of an issue is coaching here? Is his job safe in Baltimore? I
I
still
don't know
feel
how
like it is, but
I don't know how it couldn't be.
that me
And
too, but then when you sit down and start to break it down, it's like, man, people put so much on Lamar when things aren't going well, but then I don't hear as much of that heat on John Harbaugh about this. Is it safe?
well, and that's the thing. And it's weird because, John Harbaugh, who was a special teams guy by trade. So the offense is not
Right.
his offense. The defense is not his defense. Is this more of a hey, you're pushing John Harbaugh to maybe make a move for move's sake? I don't think you're going to change from the offense coordinator. He's been fantastic. And he was a guy that really found a way to get the passing game evolved and get Lamar up to that 4,000-yard number that I
Mhm,
think a lot of people thought was going to be unattainable for him just because they ran the ball so well. But yeah, I mean, you could look at that defense and the way they're performing, and this is what it was 37 yesterday. It was well over 30 the week before. So you're talking 75, 80 points over the last 2 weeks. Yes, it's the
mhm,
Lions. Yes, it's the Chiefs. But that's the number that people are going to look at and kind of have an issue with, especially after you gave up 40 week one to the Buffalo Bills. So I mean, your
mhm.
claim to fame can't be, well, we held the Browns to 17.
I guess my last question here, my big overarching question right now for the Ravens is what now? Like where do they go from here? Because they are lucky. You bring up the division right now. There is no Joe Burrow at the moment. The Browns are looking good in certain ways, but I don't think they're going to win this division. The Steelers, it can fall apart at kind of any moment when your quarterback is 100 years old. Where do the Ravens go from here?
The Ravens just got to block out the noise and just go back to
Mm,
what you are.
like us.
And this is even the thing, 100% the game needs to go through Lamar. And I've kind of talked about this for years. Like the way Lamar had been being used, it always kind of felt like it wasn't sustainable. Like eventually there was maybe going to be some big injury if he was constantly going to put himself out there with his legs. But right now, he is the absolute best you got. And for all these years where this team was a, 13, 12, 13, 14 win team, most of it was, Lamar Jackson well over 3,500 yards passing. Well, Lamar Jackson close to 1,000 yards. You have to have defenses back to having the fear of God of Lamar Jackson.
Mhm.
Because if that's the case, it should make Derrick Henry's life a little easier to run the ball. It should make the ability to throw the ball a little easier. And, that is still the absolute best thing the Baltimore Ravens have going for them. And if that means, look, it's all you ate, and, if you throw it, I don't care. If you run it, you better make sure you get it and just block out the noise. And I think part of it is they really never have been here where it's 1-3 and you're talking about 110 and 120 points in three losses that they've played. You know, Everybody gets their comeuppance, and maybe it's time for Baltimore. The question is, do you whine out, take the rest of the day off, or do you get back in there and start clawing away? You come out this week, you beat the Texans by 20. I don't think it's going to be overly impressive, but I think everybody in that locker room is going to feel a lot better about themselves.
Mm.